last year in July, in a place called Gurugram, which is one of the smart cities very close to Delhi, part of the national capital region, there was a massive citizenship verification drive whereby hundreds of Bengali speaking, primarily Muslim migrant workers were detained for a few days. Because as soon as we got news, we went there and along with other organizations, we raised strong questions about the way it was being done. So after a few days, they were released. Now, we were very surprised that it happened that way. I mean, how can suddenly a bunch of people be picked up and put in detention centers for a few days? Where did this come from? And then as we searched deeper, we found that this was based on a particular order by the government issued in June last year, an order which asked all the states and union territories to actually look very proactively for possible Bangladeshi immigrants, or rather Bangladeshi infiltrators, as the new discourse kind of terms it. To look for Bangladeshi infiltrators, detain them immediately on suspicion, check their citizenship, and if not definitely found to be Indian, prepare to deport them across the border. Now, the interesting thing here was that the onus lay entirely on the government to check the citizenship. So the people who are being detained, they didn't really have a say in the whole process. And also importantly, see, this suspicion, based on which people would be detained, was not clearly defined. There was no clear definition as to the basis on which the government would suspect people of being Bangladeshi infiltrators and detain them for a verification drive. So the order was completely arbitrary. As we looked through the order, we also found ways to challenge it in the court of law, but the order still stands. And from that point till today, we find that in different parts of the country, these kind of verification drives have been going on. Now, this may seem to be, a rather innocuous drive, as per the government's version, but it actually is very similar to certain ways in which communities have been targeted by the Hindu nationalist state. You might be aware of the way people have been targeted on allegations of love jihad, on allegations of cow slaughter. In all these cases, you find a certain use of legal administrative mechanisms, a government order or a particular law being passed, and that sends into motion a range of activities involving the local administration as well as non-state forces, local militias, like the cow protection groups or the anti-Romeo squads. And in the case of the verification drives, again, a lot of local militias, some of which are not even named, but which randomly come in and start questioning migrant workers, harassing them, beating them up, and so on and so forth. So we feel that this attack on migrant workers, Bengali-speaking Muslim migrant workers, is part of the mechanism of the Hindutva state to target a particular community. Now, the community here, of course, being migrant workers, Bengali Muslims, many things overlapping here. The state is clearly Islamophobic. It's been made very clear in the policies and in the way it behaves. But also here we have to see that Bengal, alongside Northeast and the southern states, don't fit very neatly in the political imaginary of Hindu nationalism. So an added reason to target Bengali workers in particular. Alongside that, we also find rise in xenophobia. People from the Northeast, young students like Angel Chakma who migrate to study, facing very brutal attack and then killed on 9 December last year by a mob. So these kind of things have happened before, but the sheer brutality and the sheer frequency and the pattern of it, the people being targeted, people from communities who don't fit the political imaginary of Hindutva very easily, is there for all of us to see. So therefore, we have organized this webinar to learn more about the kind of attacks happening on migrants, what ties all these people together, whether it is a student like Angel Chakma from Tripura, or whether it is Bengali migrant workers, is the fact that they are migrants. So this is also tied to the political economy of migration. right? In India, people migrate for better opportunities in education, in employment, and part of the reason being the long history of unequal and unbalanced regional development. So people are forced to migrate. When we look at the violence in Manipur, again we see that there are people who are being forced out of their homes and forced to migrate to other parts of the country where they're facing violence from the state and various elements in society. So bringing these questions together, we are having this webinar today titled Whose Republic? We will specifically be discussing the various kinds of attack on migrants, Bengali migrants, migrants from the Northeast, and also we will analyze why this is happening. And most importantly, we will discuss what are the strategies that we can adopt as unions, as civil society organizations, as citizens to actually intervene in the situation and stop this as far as possible. And alongside that, prop up migration as a key axis of politics in India today. So that's what we are going to do today. On that note, I want to welcome all our panelists. We'll hear them one by one, but one of our panelists, Dr. Madhuri Kakoti, Dr. Medusa, could not join us today. And that's because, unfortunately, today she was diagnosed with dengue fever and she had to be hospitalized. So we wish her a speedy recovery. And we hope to have her in future panels, maybe specifically on the question of Northeastern immigrants that requires a whole discussion altogether, a separate discussion. So we can't have her today, but all the other panelists are here. And I will request them to come onto the panel one by one and share their views on what's going on. We also have migrant workers from Bengal who are working in different parts of the country who will share their experiences with us. So on that note, let me welcome our first speaker. Our first speaker is Asif Faruk from a particular organization, Porijai Shromik Oikko Moncho, Migrant Workers Unity Forum. Asif will tell us about the kind of work that the forum is doing and this new kind of challenge that migrant workers are facing, this dog whistling as Bangladeshi infiltrators and how it is affecting their lives. Asif, bhai, over to you.
So, good evening, all of you. May I talk to Bengali? Lots of Bengali migrant worker maybe listen
হ্যাঁ
to.
আপনি বাংলায় বলুন আপনি বাংলায় বলুন আমরা ইংরেজিতে একটা অনুবাদ করে দেবো সাথে সাথে কোনো অসুবিধা নেই
ওকে 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 থ্যাংক ইউ আমরা পরিযায়ী শ্রমিক নিয়ে কাজ করে থাকি বোঝা যাচ্ছে
So Asif is basically saying that he works with the migrant workers, his organization, based in Bengal.
বিশেষ করে যখন বিজেপি সরকার 2014 সালের
So
কেন্দ্রে
he's
আসে
talking about especially the time post 2014 after BJP government basically came to. So there was a specific targeted attack which started on the Bengali migrant Muslim workers, especially the migrant ones in the state and also nationally.
কথা
So
বলে
since 2014, this has been increasing, at a tremendous rate. But over the last couple of years, we have seen this increase at, an expedited fashion. And we have observed the kind of impacts which have happened, especially post-COVID on the kind of migrant workers and their plight in the state. So the scare basically is also to the risk of basically being killed or attacked, and to the extent of basically losing your life. And this is at a tremendous rate at this point of time. So our organization basically initiated a helpline number both in 2024 and 2025, and what we realized that the number of calls which were being received on the helpline number by the workers was so high that not one number was basically enough. So in February 2025, a number of migrant Muslim Bengali workers in the state of Haryana from Gurugram, their houses were demolished, and we saw an increasing number of calls basically being received in the helpline number. So basically, the nature of this attack also started happening in the state of UP, and different sort of working class groups like Feriwala groups, and especially from the migrant working class groups, they were started getting attacked. And this is something which was also noticed during that whole time. So this basically also increased after the Pahalgam attack, which was a terrorist activity attack which happened in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So post 2025, post the Pahalgam attack, what we saw that the nature of attacks started increasing, especially for people who are Bengalis and the Bengali Muslim communities. And these were sort of extrajudicial kind of nature of attacks. And the police didn't follow the rule book or the law, and they were basically, harassed just for their identity and their language. So in multiple districts in Bengal, what we observed that post all of this, Pahalgam attack and all the movements which happened in the Uttar Pradesh and Haryana, a lot of Muslim Bengali migrant workers who were already resident in the state and outside the primary jurisdiction of Calcutta, they were being pushed into the state of Bangladesh or the country Bangladesh based on their identity. So what we observed that this also started happening in the state of Maharashtra, and the organization basically started outreaching them with all the documents. And so in the state of Maharashtra police basically informed the organization that these workers who were already being targeted, they have been already handed over to the BSF, and they have been identified as Bangladeshi. So it was basically asked to the Maharashtra police how this procedure was done, and the Maharashtra police government gave a document. And this document was basically stating that the Siliguri BSF group was receiving all of these people, all of these workers. And this document was stating that the Siliguri BSF department is going to push off all of these workers from the state of Maharashtra who are now received to Bangladesh. But none of this was basically communicated properly. Then the organization basically reached out to the West Bengal state government, and then they asked to be connected with the Maharashtra police government and also to the BSF. But all of this was too late because the idea was already implemented, and the idea was to push these people from this Kuch Bihar. The name of these people who were pushed out were these people were also beaten up, the names which were just said. And these people were saying that we are from Murshidabad, we are not from Bangladesh, we are from Bardhaman, Murshidabad, all of these districts. And these people were still not let gone, and they were sent to Bangladesh for 2 days. And only after post connecting with the West Bengal government and the state police departments, couple of days later, the initiative to basically bring these people being back was initiated. Another incident where this person whose name is mentioned, they had to keep their 5-year-old kid back in the state of Maharashtra, and these parents were basically pushed into the state of Bangladesh. And despite all the documents which have been given, they nobody listened to them, and they had to leave their 5-year-old child in the state of Maharashtra, and they had to go to Bangladesh. They were pushed off. And only after the intervention of the West Bengal state government through bilateral talks with Bangladesh, people could basically be brought back. In the month of June, end of June, we also saw that Sonali Khatun and other 5 more women, they were pushed into the state of Bangladesh. And despite giving all the documents from the Election Commission, which basically proves you to be a voter, proves you to be a citizen, especially in the state of BJP run state government, nobody's willing and choosing to believe that these people are, Indian nationals, and nobody's being able to listen to them. And basically, every form of torture, detention was, meted out to these people, and they were basically being forced to accept that they're not from Indian nationals. In Odisha, again, we saw that one migrant Muslim Bengali worker was killed, and he was basically another ferrywala whose name was just said. He was being forced to, chant Jai Shri Ram, which is a classic Hinduism tag, which is basically used by this regime. And these people are being beaten up just because of their identity. And in Odisha, what we are seeing post BJP government coming in, the Polytechnic College, which is an institution in the college, that has been transitioned into a detention center. And all of this is being regimented with the help of the state police departments. by the BJP-run states, and this is a very coordinated sort of an attack which is happening. Kendrapada Polytechnic College is a government college, which used to be a government college, but is now being transitioned into a detention center where people or the community workers, migrant community workers of the Bengali Muslim background, they are being basically caught and they are being, detained over this place on the accusation of them being Bangladeshi nationals. Whenever these people are being reached out, the only thing which they are saying that we will be just releasing them in a couple of days post the verification is done. But the sort of living conditions in all of these houses, there is no proper food arrangement, small rooms, small accommodation places for less than three, four people. It's extremely hot and there was no process for, clean drinking water, fans or any sort of air conditioning. Nothing was basically provisioned. And when we are basically going and talking to the senior police officials of the state, they are completely denying all of these accusations, despite when we get to know of this. And all of this, which is basically happening, is being basically centrally done through the union government's notification, which has been pushed out. And the connotation of this sort of a detention has a lot of political alignments to the way this union government and its politics is functioning. All of these people who have basically been based out in these other states who were there for work, now they are failing to get any sort of job. They're feeling unsafe. They have to come back. And nobody's basically solving all of this problem for them. And despite this huge scale problem, nobody at the governments, especially the union government, is basically thinking of this problem. The organization has also sent a document and a written letter to the Ministry of Home Affairs, but none of the actions from the MHA is basically being taken up to solve this problem. And this basically indicates that this is something which is happening because the MHA wants this to happen. And had this not been the case, then people like Joel Rana, who was recently lynched and killed in the Odisha, wouldn't have happened. And Awal Sheikh is another recent person from the state of Tamil Nadu who has been accused to be Bangladesh and is right now in detention center and his case is being run. It's sort of a viral mentality right now, which is being spread across that somebody who basically speaks Bengali is a Bengali Muslim, and which is being used to basically attack based on the kind of language which you're speaking. And we are seeing this across multiple number of states, be it in Odisha, be it Haryana, be it UP. And the Feriwala group, it's a working group, is the specific target who are being tracked by the police, who are being targeted by the police, and because Feriwala has a huge number of migrant Bengali Muslim workers. Bengali Muslim migrant workers have an absolutely socio-economically unstable situation also in their home state, which is in West Bengal. And now this kind of a attribute is also bringing up more intersectional and interlevel challenges to them to basically survive, to get employment, to have a better living standards. So what we also see that these people are also facing a lot of challenge because of their lack of education, their lack of understanding of how the documentation works. And the organization is trying its best to basically do all of this work to understand what their documentation flaws are, what kind of problems they are facing. And the larger issue is these people do not have the education to understand all of this. Asif's organization is basically working to through this helpline to coordinate, and they also have a legal cell, and they are running this legal cell based in West Bengal, and they are trying to coordinate with all of these people, also through medical facilities. And if any migrant worker is in a severe health condition, they are also trying to look into that and work with that. However, the larger problem is the 37 lakh people who are the migrant workers who are outside the state of West Bengal right now. Their health conditions, their educational conditions, their economic situations is absolutely in a very poor state. And overall, if this kind of attack is happening, and the government is basically not being able to resolve any of this problem, But overall, what we are seeing, and a larger attack is now being, meted out to them to prove their nationality because they're Indians or not. Multiple number of requests from the organization has been sent that, this process may be simplified, this process may be easy. And also a request was made so that to the election commission that none of the names of the migrant workers are being lost from the voter list, but none of this is basically being helped. No resolution is being provided because this is a very political way of thought, and election commission is influenced by the ideology of the political party. And the larger problem that these people are not being able to go through this process is because they also can't afford to lose a day of their job. For them to have their documents at place, they would have to be at their home state, be at line, but they can't afford that because they will be losing their livelihood. So their larger concern is that they would have to go out and they don't have any certainty to be in the state back. So the sort of attack which they're seeing is across everywhere. They can't be at their home state because of the economic condition. And if they're leaving the state for work, they're basically being attacked and harassed by the state authorities and the police. Another thing which was heard that when the police are basically attacked, or coming to track them, that they are being also being asked for the bribe by the local level police officials when basically certain of this tracking is happening, and only they are being relieved of the detention center once they are paying this bribe. And this is not just happening to migrant workers, but there's also a gender angle is happening to the women. So Sonali Khatun and Danish Sheikh, this is the example. Their family basically reached out to the organization when this happened, and this was on the 18th June when this call was received. And they were asked for a bribe of 30,000 Indian currency INR, and they take this money, they had to pay this money. And only after this sum was paid, they were relieved. And again, they were asked for another additional sum of 50,000. And despite paying this first sum and the second money, they were said that you won't be relieved, that certain DNA test is going to happen. And this problem basically kept on happening. But despite not being able to raise, because they couldn't raise the 50,000 money, they asked a lawyer, and they were pushed to Bangladesh because they couldn't basically comply. And they were there till the 6th of December. And only after the intervention of Supreme Court of India, they were basically brought back. External regulations which we see in the other state, the BJP is basically fueling this sort of a push of attack on the migrant workers. And if rule of law was being followed, none of this would have happened on real level. And there's a very political, targeting attack which is happening on the Bengali Muslim migrant workers. And it's high time that, this sort of violence which has been spread across needs to be basically stopped. And this can only happen if all the, sections of the society, civil society, politics, and everybody, they have to come together. And this notification basically has to be rolled back and that has to be cancelled.
So we are going to come back to Asif Bhai at the end of the meeting. At the moment, we have some migrant worker comrades who live in different parts of the country, and they have thankfully joined us. They will tell us what they are facing. So we have time to hear from at least a couple of them. I would like to request Asif Bhai to facilitate this. So they have all joined through my link, and I am now changing my language to Bangla so they can speak, and then we can continue with the translation in the way we have been doing with you.
শুনতে পাচ্ছে না my I'm a migrant worker. I'm from Murshidabad and I work in Mumbai. Firstly, the situation which was said by Asif, which happened in Mumbai. So we see when we are going to the market, when we are speaking in Bengali, people are asking just by hearing the language, they are seeing that if we are Bengali speakers, if we are speaking in Muslim, we are being attacked, we are being targeted and harassed. We have no source of income in the state of West Bengal. And just to have an income source, we have come out of the state. I have a family and multiple of us, workers like us, they have come out of the state. And just because we speak Bangla, we are being tagged as Bangladeshi. And especially since we are Muslim, and we are seeing that people are getting killed just because we are Muslims and we are Bengalis. We are at a everyday, trauma and attack. We are scared every night if somebody basically comes at the night and says that we are Bangladeshi and picks us up. We were so scared that somebody basically a mob came and lit a fire at somebody's house in Odisha, and we are scared about this every day. হ্যাঁ, শোনা যাচ্ছে, শোনা যাচ্ছে. We are absolutely scared about our everyday. And in Maharashtra, the current chief minister in Maharashtra, he is basically coming and saying to journalists that we won't let Bangla speakers be in Bengal. And especially we are telling to Muslims that they have to leave. And I don't understand how the Maharashtra CM is basically saying that we are Indians. And that's why I'm requesting all of you that it's a request that to understand our situation, that we are doing this for the sake of our livelihood. Our Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee, we request her that nobody is basically listening to us and working for our protection, and we have to do this because we need to survive for our livelihood. I came in 2021 in Odisha 5 years back when Odisha Patnaik was the chief minister. And after the last election, when we saw that when this BJP government came in, this violence has increased. This forced kind of a situation of saying Jai Shri Ram and being forced. In Sambalpur, after this Joel Rana person was killed, I came after that, and everybody knows about this situation. It is clear that the BJP government, which is there, that even in Sambalpur, everybody is scared because at any time certain people may be attacked, and there is no protection. There is nobody's basically standing on support, be it the citizens, be it the police. In general situation, we see that the police regulation is basically there to help you, be the district magistrate or the police, but situation has changed in Odisha. Just the last week we saw that when we are working outside the main road, people are just abusing us right now, especially because we are Bengalis. They're just abusing us. And the accusation is that you're Bangladeshis, you're from outside. Why have you come here? And we called Asif to basically report about this and to report the police. But this basically violates our dignity. And we are here for work, and nobody should abuse us like this. I'm here to work. We are here for a livelihood, and we are here because we don't have work. And there are a lot of people from Odisha who are there in the state of West Bengal. Nothing like this is happening over here. And nobody is basically doing something about this. People are just complaining. So many people in Odisha, from Odisha, are basically there in other state in Bengal. Nobody's basically harassing them. And we are not Bangladeshis. We don't understand why this harassment is happening to us. Somebody, randomly is abusing us and asking to check our Aadhaar card once they get to know that we are speaking in Bangla. No matter where we go to the market, we ask for a tea, we are being abused just because we are speaking Bengali. No matter where we are going, we are basically being abused. Post this, killing of Joel Rana, we are extremely scared and things are very bad. And at a day-to-day basis, we're extremely scared that some sort of protection needs to be given to us, but nothing is basically happening. What happens if somebody basically comes and randomly kills us? We are always scared about our livelihood, about our lives at a daily level. And the government at the highest level, at the state government, needs to basically be cognizant of the situation. But nobody's basically putting a thought about how the migrant workers and the Bengali migrant workers are facing the problem. That's the largest problem right now. It's high time that something basically be done. Like a certain card is basically introduced that, proves their identification. So nobody basically harasses them. Some sort of this initiative needs to be taken. 24th, Joel Rana was killed on 25th. Coming back and people are forcing us to say Jai Shri Ram. And police is basically coming and asking us to basically leave. And what we understand is the police are basically working in line with these, Hindutva brigade and these political elements. And their police is basically coming and asking us to leave. And why this should happen? We are here for work. This should not happen to anybody because in no matter which state you are. And there's an extremely sad situation for all of this. And we feel ashamed that we stay in this country where such an experience is being meted out to people. And this is obviously happening because we are Bengalis, but this is largely happening more because we are Muslims. And I'm in Sumbalpur, where this basically, this issue had happened. And it's high time something is basically done about this.
Okay, we thank the workers who have been able to join us. We now will listen to Comrade Clifton de Rosario, who is from the All India Central Council of Trade Unions. He's also an advocate and he has extensively worked with migrant workers, organizing them and standing with them. Clifton, over to you.
Thank you, Akash, and thank you to Asif and other friends who shared their experiences. Really, I think much has already been said, and there's just a couple of points that I want to add. I don't want to take up too much time, but I think also we should have some time for the discussion. But broadly, when one is listening to what is being said, uh, I keep cannot help but remember this very good book called The Dual State by Ernst Frankl. Um, Many people know that Ernst Frankl was actually a labor lawyer with an exceptional practice in Nazi Germany before Hitler came to power. And then, of course, after Hitler comes to power, the way in which the Jewish community was treated, and of course, the way Jewish lawyers were kind of treated, we all know that. So basically, in his practice, what what Ernst Frankl does is he tries and bring people more and more within the what he calls the normative state. So he basically says that there are for him Nazi Germany was the uneasy coexistence of two states. One was the normative state where there is generally the respect for the law, and the other is the prerogative state, the one that violates the very same laws. I think if you were to look at what's happening in our country today, and look at the kind of testimonies that have come out here. I think, in a sense, that kind of it exemplifies that. And if you look at the way in which people are being dealt with, the arbitrary way in which people are being picked up, I'll just deal with that first, and then I'll talk about the other two parts that I want to speak about. There are enough number of instances now of the police just, authorities just knocking on somebody's door and picking them up and throwing them into detention centers. Now, let's understand that this is the normative state, which is where you're trying to deal with this, the identified problem of infiltration through the law. Now, what is that doing? What that's doing is, enough number of instances now where, without any kind of a proper legal procedure, just on some kind of assumption, some people are picked up, kept in detention homes for months on end, and then they have to go through the entire rigor of challenging the detention orders, going to court, and trying to get some kind of justice there. The case, of course, of I think her name was Sonali Kanum, who was sent to who was sent away to just pushed over to Bangladesh, and had to approach the Calcutta High Court, and then the Calcutta High Court actually gave quite a decent judgment in Bodu Sheikh versus Union of India, where I'd like to read out just a couple of things that the court kind of stated over there, because I think this is absolutely this is essential for us to understand, even in terms of the kind of illegalities that are being perpetrated on the people by the state, as it were. So the court goes on to say that it is true that under Section 9 of the 1946 Act, the burden is upon the person that he or she is not a foreigner. However, such provision does not empower the executive to pick up a person at random, knock at his door, and tell him that he is a foreigner. First, it is for the authorities concerned to have in their knowledge or possession some basic material or information to suspect that the person is a foreigner and not Indian. The procedure to be adopted for such deportation has been mandated. So this is not just the Calcutta High Court saying this. The Supreme Court, in a previous judgment in Rahim Khan's case, actually says this. It says that these powers that you have under the law, which basically is the Foreigners Act and the Foreigners Order, which has now been replaced by what is known as the Immigration and Foreigners Act of 2025, that does not give you this kind of power. Just basic knock on people's door and say that, I suspect that you're a Bangladeshi immigrant, and I'm going to throw you into these detention centers. Now, that is something that is being broken at any given point in time. The second thing is, even if you look at the kind of detentions that are happening, there are at least two things that are required to be done. So, supposing you presume that somebody has been arrested and detained under these laws, the it can only be done via procedure, and that obviously, that's what the Constitution would say, that due procedure is necessary for the protection of your fundamental rights. Now, what is it that they're supposed to do? So there is this, interestingly, there's this order of 2/5/2025, 2nd May 2025, issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs, which quote unquote deals with the situations where suspected Bangladeshis or Rohingyas are formed. Now, what does this say? This basically says that even if you find that there are, say, the authorities suspect that certain people are Bangladeshis, then what they have to do is collect their documents, send it to the home state, allow the home state to carry out their kind of inquiry, and once that report is received from the home state, then they'll have to take action in accordance with that. Now, there are enough number of instances where people are picked up. Bengali Muslims are picked up, say, in Delhi or Bombay or even a place like Bangalore. And you'll have the authorities from West Bengal saying that, hey, we've done our entire inquiry and this person is an Indian citizen. This is something that, they're still not going with. They're still not complying with that. And again, forcing people to go into courts. There's another, interestingly, there's an affidavit that's been filed by the Union of India in the Supreme Court in one of the cases pertaining to citizenship, where they actually undertake to say that in the instant, in the event we have enough of material to show that a person is a Bangladeshi, we'll still have to check with the Bangladeshi counterparts whether that's true, and so we'll have to send it to them. And on receiving a report from them, we will take whatever action. So even the normative state, right, and the way it kind of functions is that you have at least these minimum kind of checks and balances, and that again is something that, to what extent that is working and not working is there for us to see. And sometimes we've heard the kind of responses that come from the judiciary that really, I would imagine, doesn't instill too much of confidence in how the judiciary is going to respond to this. The second part, of course, if you're going along with Frankel's kind of articulation, is the prerogative state. And here, I think, there's a dual strategy that is operating. So basically, an increased terror from below to ensure that the political interests from the top are pushed through. So what do we mean by that? You look at the kind of attacks that are taking place on Bengali Muslims across India, and it's literally like some kind of a textbook. It's some kind of uh, some kind of guidelines have been laid down. It's been sent across the entire country, and it's being used everywhere. So in every single place, you'll have this bunch of hoodlums masquerading as Hindutva activists who would think that it's absolutely their right to barge into somebody's house and Bengali Muslims' house, intimidate them, demand documents from them, accuse them of being Bengali Muslims, in some cases torture them, beat them, and in some instances even kill them. And a lot of this is even being shot on videos and then being circulated. That's the kind of impunity with which this kind of violence is taking place. I wanted to just give you, the past month, what are the various incidents that we at least know of? On 17/12/2025, Ramnarayan Baghel, a migrant worker from Chhattisgarh, was accused of theft. His citizenship was questioned and he was beaten to death. This was in Palakkad, Kerala. On 24th of December in Sambalpur, Odisha, Jewel Sheikh was accused of being Bangladeshi, beaten. 26/12/2025, this is again in Badrak, Odisha. Arshad Malik, a 35-year-old from West Bengal, same kind of treatment. On 15th or 16th of January 26, a body of a migrant worker, migrant Muslim Bengali, was found in Daltonganj, Jharkhand. On 16th of this month, Anisur Rehman was beaten up in Bihar. Again, the exact same thing. On 22nd of this month, Manjur Alam Raskar was beaten up in Andhra Pradesh. Again, the same thing. On 22nd, again in Tamil Nadu. So what you're seeing is it's just rapid now. It's happening in every single kind of a city. And in in the city of Bangalore, what we're seeing is there are these well-known Hindutva kind of terrorists. There's no other way, to describe them, who claim to fame is that that they've attacked people in the name of cow protection, who have attacked Muslims in the name of cow protection, and now who are going from house to house doing this exact same thing. It's almost like this task has been outsourced to these Hindutva terrorists, and the state just sits back and looks. Now, this kind of a lynching this undermines the rule of law. This undermines any kind of a constitutional imagination that we have, and this is totally detrimental to a democracy. But even so, that's the kind of situation that we have. So basically, when we look at the question of Bengali Muslims, it's literally being caught between the normative state and the prerogative state, and there's no hope either way. That's the kind of situation, which is why this is an extremely alarming situation, which is something that all of us will have to really think about how we're going to deal with it. I just wanted to add a couple of more points. One is in regard to this, when you're talking about the Republic, we're looking at a mass disenfranchisement of migrant workers. Now, if you look at the figures, it's stunning. So basically, the Union of India in June of last year, through the Election Commission of India, came up with this particular kind of a weapon called the Special Intensive Revision of the Electoral Rolls. It's literally like a surgical strike on the voting rights of people of this country. Now, under the guise of cleaning up, so-called, quote unquote, cleaning up the electoral rolls, what is being done is literally a test of citizenship by authorities who don't have that right. And this entire process has been questioned in the Supreme Court, but unfortunately there is no status quo, there is no stay that has been that has been directed. So this entire process is going through, and what we're seeing is large scale deletions of people, particularly migrant workers. Here I must say that when I say migrant workers, this is not only Muslim migrant workers. This is not only Muslim migrant workers from Bengal, West Bengal, but I still think when we talk about migrant workers, this is an issue that we really can't, turn our eyes away from. So let me give you some figures. So this entire revision has already taken place in Bihar first, the state of Bihar, and after that it's taken place in 9 other states and 3 union territories. We don't have the breakup of all the states, but for at least 3 states we have the breakup. So in Bihar, 65 lakh people, their names have been deleted from the voter list. Some 22 lakh are said to be dead. 36 lakh of them are so-called are people who apparently have permanently migrated or were absent during this entire process of revision. In Uttar Pradesh, out of the 28.9 million people deleted, 12.9 constitute this category. In Tamil Nadu, out of 97.4 lakh people deleted, 52.7 lakh constitute these. Now, what do you mean by permanently migrated? These are the people who are either migrating within the state for work or who have migrated to other states for work, and the state does not think that it's perfectly fine to delete them from the electoral rolls of their hometowns only because they weren't there during that 1 month when this entire revision was carried out. And the discrimination is writ large on this entire process. So the very same state that is disenfranchising lakhs and lakhs and lakhs of migrant workers through this very process is very fine to actually have a very special kind of a process to ensure that those who have migrated to foreign countries, that they are not deleted from the rolls. So the law has been amended to ensure that any person who has gone, say, abroad for either work or for education, to ensure that their names can be retained in their electoral rolls of their hometowns. That's how discriminatory this entire process is. So if you're rich and you're migrating for employment abroad, or you have the money to, or you have the wherewithal to go abroad to study abroad, your name will be protected in the electoral rolls in your hometown. But if you're poor and you're migrating to any other part of India just to work, you will be thrown out of the out of these out of the electoral rolls. And the question to be asked here is, what is the intention of the state? What does the state want to do with this entire mass of disenfranchised migrant workers? Does it intend that this substantial section of people who have been deleted from the list, that they are enrolled in the states where they're working now, which literally is a forced demographic kind of a displacement, which the state wants to kind of force on the other states? This is something that's really extremely alarming and something that we really need to take care of, really think about. The last point I wanted to, I'll just make a couple of comments on this and then I'll end, uh, is when we talk about migrant workers and the protection, the kind of situation they're in. I think if you remember the COVID and the forcible lockdowns that happened at that time, uh, the social reality of migrant workers was laid bare at that point. The kind of the insecurity of every form, whether it was job insecurity, wage insecurity, social insecurity, the precarious lives that they're leading, was something that became apparent within a couple of days of the lockdown being clamped. Lakhs of workers, migrant workers from all parts of the country, started taking to the roads, saying that we'll walk back to our home states rather than die of starvation in the places where we're kept. That's the precarious lives that the migrant workers were leading. Now, this was despite there being a law, a 1979 law that provided some kind of labor rights for migrant workers. Now, even that basic rights that the migrant workers enjoyed, that is something which has now been taken away by these new labor codes that have come. So if you were to look at it overall, if I have to summarize this, if right now, if you look at what's happening with the migrant workers, it's literally a kind of a attack that they're facing by the Indian state from on all fronts. A, if you're Muslim, and if you're Bengali, then your very existence in this country is going to be challenged either by a mob or by the state itself. Your citizenship is only going to be challenged, and like we all know, your citizenship is the right to bear any rights at all. So if you're a Bengali Muslim migrant, you are at that apex kind of a threat is what you're going to face. And for other migrant persons in this country, migrant workers in this country, the entire right, the attack is on their right to vote, the right to claim, the kind of connectedness that they have to their home state, and also the protection of labor rights that they have. So, kind of a all-round kind of an attack on migrant workers is what we're seeing. Not for a moment am I trying to displace the kind of the threat itself to the lives of Bengali Muslims. But when talking about the attacks on migrant workers, I think there is all of this also taking place, and one really needs to bear that in mind. I'll stop here. I think I've not overshot, hopefully.
No,
Akash?
not at all. Thank you very much for your words. We will now listen to Advocate Supantha Sinha, who's a Supreme Court advocate and has been working with the Gurgaon, with friends in Gurgaon ever since last July. And he's also been part of the Migrant Solidarity Network. Supantha will tell us a bit about the kind of work we have been trying to do to provide support to the workers and to also, as Arnav very correctly pointed out in the chat box, in our efforts to challenge this order in the court. Over to you, Supantha.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Whatever I wanted to say, it has mostly been covered by my predecessor learned speakers. I would just like to first start with what MSN is, because a lot of queries have been coming as to what this Migrant Solidarity Network is. How did it, what is the procedure, like how did it get created? What is the point of its inception? So, MSN Migrant Solidarity Network was created as a spontaneous endeavor. There was not much of pre-planning involved in creation of Migrant Solidarity Network. So it was around July 2025 last year. We started getting lots of information about these kind of illegal detention where people were being caught and were being put in places which were not designated detention center. They were neither jails, they were neither police station, but some sort of a center which police were terming it as a holding center. So it was during this phase of affairs, like this phase of events, this MSN, this concept of MSN got created. So MSN is basically a collective of individuals, a collective of groups who are democratic spirited, who are civil liberty spirited, and who wishes to defend the values of our constitution and that of civil liberty and personal autonomy. So MSN is basically what MSN is trying to do is MSN is trying to create a network of these kind of democratic thinking individual, and trying to build an ecosystem whereby they can, if a problem of this nature is arising anywhere in any parts of the country, we can actively intervene in those situations and we can find a resolution to that situation. We are extensively working in order to find out a solution to the problems that are being faced by the working class population and that of the migrant population of this country, especially under the present regime. So we are actively working in Gurgaon. I am personally handling the case of Turkman Gate, which again is a case of identity targeted detention and identity targeted arrest. So yes, this is what Migrant Solidarity Network is about. So the purpose of this network is to, which I already told, is to bring together people from different walks of society, people who wants to defend the intrinsic value of our constitution, the civil liberties of an individual, the fundamental rights of an individual, something which is constantly under attack, which is getting corroded with each passing day under the present regime. Now, coming to this detention, this drive of detention, which happened last year, July, which was the inception point of creation of Migrant Solidarity Network. So, if we see this very drive that happened, the illegality is at the very core of this drive, which was carried out by the by the central government of our country. Now, why I say so? That this entire drive is illegal at its very core. It's because there's a very, so I would just like to quote a very a line from a very noted judgment of Supreme Court. This judgment was delivered in reference to Section 6A of Citizenship Act, which was regarding the adjudication of migrants in Assam, regarding the problems of migration in Assam. So while adjudicating that case, Supreme Court had made a statement that citizenship is at the heart of the constitutional order. Citizenship is at the heart of the constitutional order. So this is the kind of concept about citizenship, about the nationality which our country holds. However, on 2nd May 2025, this MHA directive was issued, which is the genesis, which starts this entire problem, which is the source of this entire problem. So this 2nd May 2025 MHA directive specific. So firstly, this directive was not available on any public record. When you are a government of a democratic country, so whichever directive that you are issuing, which affects the personal liberty and freedom of a citizen, that directive has to be on public record. It is mandatory. It mandatorily has to be on public record, and it shows so that it can be challenged if the citizens find that record, find that particular document to be detrimental towards their interest. They should be in a position to challenge that order. In this case, that directive was never uploaded on any public forum in the first place. Now, when somehow we were able to obtain that directive, so when we went through that directive, what we found was that directive speaks about identifying and detaining people who the authorities are suspecting to be Bangladeshi nationals or illegal immigrants. Now, the most ridiculous part of this entire directive is, among others, there is no specific identifier, there is no specific parameters based on which to identify or to suspect a person as illegal immigrant. It has been completely kept open to the whims and fancies of the authorities and the detaining officials, which is why all this entire problem got created in a more aggressive manner, because there was no parameters, there was no guidelines. What guidelines needs to be followed, what parameters needs to be kept in mind while identifying somebody, or while detaining somebody under the suspicion of illegal migrant. There was no clarity about any of that. So this created this entire problem. So another thing, this brings me to a very noted judgment of Supreme Court. So that judgment of Supreme Court, Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India, it says, it very clearly lays down that any order which is violative of a person's fundamental right or person's liberty and freedom cannot be in secretive. It has to be open in public forum. I'd like to quote the exact lines of that judgment. This Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India, 1978, 1 SCC 248 is the citation. This judgment goes on to say, a government which revels in secrecy in the field of people's liberty act against democratic decency. This was held by the Supreme Court itself. Despite such verdicts of Supreme Court, this MHA directive is completely silent, is completely vague on what are the aspects based on which you are to identify a person as illegal immigrant. Not just that, more concerning of all is that this was not made available to public in the first place. So people were being detained based on this directive without them being given this directive. So just imagine the fearfulness, the horror of this entire situation. Some a state is taking action against you, but is keeping you completely in dark as to why that action is being taken against you. This was the situation. So this directive is concerning, and it just shows the nefarious design of the state of our state machinery in order to target its citizen. They are their citizen, and why I am saying they are their citizen is because in India we don't have this concept of citizenship certificate. So any person who holds all the valid identity government identity cards, which are Aadhaar card, which is voter ID card, ration card, which all these migrant workers, at least the ones with whom we have met, we interacted, all of them had all these government IDs. They even had their birth certificate, their parents' birth certificate, their native places, certificates sponsored by the local councillors of their native places, from the native places. Despite that, they were suspected to be national illegal immigrant. So, what is the basis on which on which you suspected them to be illegal immigrant? They had all the government IDs. Those government IDs were not issued by some local, some private body. Those were issued by your central government bodies. So you are only issuing those government IDs to those citizens in the first place, and then again, in the second scene, you are saying that these people are illegal immigrant. Just the hilariousness of this entire procedure. This is really astounding. Another thing that is very concerning is when any such directives are issued which concerns citizens of a particular state, which the residents of a particular state. So such directives are to be issued in consultation with the state government, with that particular respective state government. There's a clear judgment, State of NCT Delhi versus Union of India 2018's judgment is there of Supreme Court, which says that cooperative federalism mandates sincere collaboration between center and state in addressing common problems. But in this case, this directive was issued completely in an unilateral manner without consulting any of the state authorities, any of the respective state government. So this just goes on to show the way the government wants to target these migrant workers who they are terming to be illegal immigrant. And there is a larger perspective, there's a larger picture to this. It's not just an identity, it's not just an attack based on their identity. That is one facet to this entire thing. Another facet which we understood after going on ground on multiple occasions is that they are trying to lower down the commerciality of these migrant workers. So now what is happening is, so they are having to come back in order to earn their livelihood. At some point of time, they are having to come back to the migrant state in order for doing work, in search of work and all. So now when they are coming back, firstly, they are not getting employed anywhere. When on occasions when they are getting employed, they are getting employed at a rate which is far lower than the rates at which other workers are getting employed. So suppose other workers are getting 100 rupees, they are getting 20 rupees. This is the kind of disparity that is happening. So this is nothing, this is just giving powers in the hands of the capitalist section of the society, the entitled section of the society. So the government is doing all these things with a very well planned mechanism, with a very well planned structure, in order to make their labor very, very less expensive. I mean, that would be a wrong term, but I would say in order to create a situation where they have to render their services at a rate which is not at all the rate, which is not at all the legally sanctioned rate, but the situation, the circumstances are such that they have to work even at a subsidized, even in those subsidized rate, which they should not be getting. They are entitled to far more wage. They're entitled to a far larger amount of payment, but they are not, because of the situation, because of the atmosphere of fear that is being created. This is one thing. Another thing that they are doing is they are bulldozing this, they are demolishing their homes. So this demolition of their home has a direct link to serving the interest of the capitalist class of the society. And I say why, because after their homes are getting bulldozed, those lands, in most of the cases it is seen that those lands are being handed over to the private player, private land mafias or private builders, who then are constructing high rises and commercially enriching projects on those lands. So this is the entire structure that is going on. So which is why at the very beginning I said that this entire thing that is going on, this identification, this drive of identifying illegal migrant workers, the illegality is at the very core of this process. So yes, I think I've covered all the points. There's nothing more to say. Yeah.
I will now invite Comrade Malay Tiwari to speak, who is the last speaker of the panel. Comrade Malay Tiwari is with CPI-ML Liberation West Bengal. And in West Bengal, they've been trying very hard to stand with the migrant workers who have been coming back after getting attacked in various states.
ঠিক আছে, এবার শোনা যাচ্ছে তো বাংলা? তো আমরা এই বিশেষত জুয়েল রানা শেখের ঘটনাটা
Post this Joel Rana situation, we visited from Murshidabad and we would like to talk about that situation. This is in Chowk Bahadur village, and we saw that it's a 19-year-old boy who was killed, and we all know the story. And we understood how the torture basically started and how this killing had happened and how many other people were there. And one of the other survivor was there. And we also visited his place. His name was Sanwar. And he narrated the entire story to us. And what we saw is that Joel's father, Jiaul Haq, was also in Sambalpur in the last year, and he was also attacked there. And the extent of this was that he never basically went back and he didn't wish to. So the result was their economically poor household, which also has his extended family, that this kind of attack also happened to his family, and they're losing their livelihood because of this. And this was the result why Joel had to basically go back and work there. So when we were trying to explore what are the other situation and the other angles, like why people are basically moving out, and when we already had, MG in Narega is basically one of the ways where you could have gotten employment in Bengal, but the union government is basically stopping any sort of money to the state and saying that there is a lot of corruption in the state, and they have stopped sending money to the state of West Bengal. The state government said that 50 days work would be provided, but nothing like that had basically come across. So there is a huge lack of employment in the state of West Bengal, especially in the rural areas, and hence basically they have to move out to the other states. The question of illegality, which comes across, that how in the month of May, this notification which we saw, which basically asked and prescribed people to be detained. We had seen that by the month of June, within a month, also the SIR process started, and also the SI process started in the state of West Bengal. And if you look at the way the illegality of the SI process is there as well, something which was not happened in Bihar, something which we saw that in Bengal. Logical discrepancy is a word which has been basically been inserted in the SIR, or the Special Intensive Revision of West Bengal, and how all of this has been inserted in all of the documents in the Bengal SIR. So logical discrepancy is something which they're getting. But there is no clarity on understanding what is logical discrepancy. Who's basically going to decide what are the modalities of understanding logical discrepancy? And in the multiple spaces where the hearing for the intensive revision is happening, within 1.5 to 2 months, it's also a question that how migrant workers are basically going to be able to do this SIR thing. So what we see that the enumeration form is being filled up by the workers, and there was a lot of assurance given by the election commission in the state that the 2002 list is going to be followed. And basically, if there is any linkage by people can be showed to the 2002's voter list, nobody else or no other documents will be required. And this was said and this was assured. So basically, a huge amount of workers basically understood this and they went back. And because of this assurance, and the initial list basically reflected their names. However, within right now, the situation is that within a couple of days, they are being asked to basically appear for the hearing because in the final list, their names are not being reflected. And this basically increases the number of risk for them because in case they're not being able to come for the hearing, their names will be taken off from the voter list. And just in case they are not going to appear for this hearing, their names might be just chucked off. So this is one angle how there is a heightened amount of insecurity for the workers. And now talking about the original notice, which was basically spread across, for the detention of the Bangladeshis, which happened in May, there's a clear connection how the SIR process is basically interlinked. Like there is a larger linkage and intention to basically create, this narrative of, identifying and deporting, foreigners. And we have already seen like this kind of a pattern of attack happening, but this is increasing in the way this official SIR process basically being happening in tandem. On one side, we are seeing that there is an administrative, detention process which is happening, and now we are seeing that this is happening at the local level, at a general person's level, through this election revision process, and more of this happening to especially the Muslim and the migrant workers. And Joelana's example is like the quintessential or the most difficult examples which we see across. What Clifton was telling us that how the different dates he was talking about, if you can look at it, that this entire process of his detention is also happening parallelly with how the SIR basically has happened. And randomly, all the forces who were also behind this, Hindutva brigade who were going parallel with the police was also happening. All of these processes are happening in parallel. And every time we see in West Bengal, the Amit Shah, the Prime Minister Modi basically coming, they are coming here multiple times. The only thing which they keep on raising is that a lot of illegal, foreigners are basically here, and that's the only thing which they want to talk about. Every time the Prime Minister or the Home Minister basically comes, the only thing which they talk about is this, and their entire agenda is to basically narrate, create this narrative of how Bangladeshis are the enemies, they are the illegal residents over here, and the objective is that they are our enemies. And narrating, the Rohingyas and Muslims and Bangladeshis and putting them together in a single picture. And basically creating this, us versus them and creating this identity of enemies in front of us. And this entire narrative is basically now being spread across the entire country. The other side, which we also see, that how migrant workers are being attacked. In the parallel process, the Bengali SIR process, there's a lot of attack on the culture and icons of Bengal, which basically has laid the groundwork for resistance and political movements. Through this SIR process, we also see a sort of an attack which comes across these kind of icons. For example, the economist Robert the same. He was sent a notice for the SIR process, and a lot of such people who do not basically align with this regime and their narrative, they are being brought into this attack. And the angle is that we are being not only talking about the workers or the Muslims, we are talking about everybody, but also the parallel choice is that we are actually, this is something which is targeted, the sort of narrative which we are seeing. And it's a politics of intimidation, it's a experience of fear and scare, which is actually going across, and this is how the BJP government is basically wanting to take control. And in this last step of SIR, which we are seeing, the seventh form, the seventh form is basically to state objection against anybody, and there is a huge amount of targeting is happening using that form at this point of time. And this is absolutely happening more for people who are from the minority sections and economically weaker sections. And in both, we are seeing that one person is basically bringing such form against 300 people. One person is basically filling up form 7 against 300 people. And we are seeing that the election commission, the local election commissioner, is basically sending notice to all of this based on his complaints. And sometimes the administrator's father's name is also basically included, and this is something which is very targeted. And the election commission basically understands all of this. Something very similar which we also saw in Assam. And one person is basically has filled up 110 people's name. And and somebody was saying there's a lot of corruption in the whole process. That a person who was said that they have filled up the form, they've actually had it, and somebody else has done it on their behalf, and they have written this letter. And we see a lot of institutional corruption and malpractice. And there's a whole narrative game which is basically coming across before the election and mobilizing the demography against the demography and changing the nature of the people and the voter list of the locations before the elections. And through it's we also don't know what is going to be included through the Form 6 and what changes are going to happen because of Form 7. So what we understand largely there is a attack on especially not just on the migrants, but also the nature of resistance of Bengal, which was not captured by the BJP and their Hindutva politics. That is something which is being attacked. And because they are not being able to fit the kind of resistance and the movement and the political understanding of Bengal. And this is the larger target which this regime has basically chosen. And this is the entire process which they are going to attack this process. Yeah. And I would like to end with this. So, thanks.
Thank you, Maulada, for covering a lot of ground in a short span of time. So we have time for some questions. Anybody wishes to ask something, you can raise your hand or put your question in the chat box. We have a question. What has been the role and response of Mamata and the TMC government to this? Could you be a bit specific? Specific condition in the northern district where workers are migrating from. Murshidabad, Uttar Dinajpur, Malda. Maulada, would you like to answer this question?
What we are seeing in the state TMC government, through Mamata Banerjee, a welfare board for the migrant workers has been set up. And we see an MP who's part of that. And when especially these problems which we are seeing, this board is basically, flagging these issues. And they're also receiving communications from, a lot of us and the activists who are basically wanting to work. These welfare board has been, sent correspondence and communication. And what we see from there is that their larger work, there was a lot of, responsiveness to the situation. But what we do see is that primarily they are doing this at an administrative level, and they have done a registration of all these workers. That is something which they have done, and this was a comprehensive thing. And when information like this is basically being sent to them, they are taking initiatives. They have taken initiatives in the case of Joel Rana, which we saw in Odisha, and the Mamata Banerjee and the TMC government has basically taken up some initiatives against this, especially bringing the dead body of a person, which has happened. Support has been provided on that front. Some support has been given to the families, but it is basically stopped over there. And certain requests have been provided, and certain assurances have been given to the workers that they can come back, and some basically notes or dissent notes have been given, or statements have been given when certain situation like this has been happening, and they have stood against the sort of this agenda, but the extent of this problem has not been this kind of initiative is not at all catering to the extent of this problem, and this board does not have the capacity also, and they haven't done enough to basically work against the nature and the extent of this problem. Yeah. So one of the initiatives which should have been done or should be done is basically creating offices of this welfare board in these various states where high number of migrant workers are basically going, like Maharashtra, Odisha. But nothing like that has basically happened. These requests have been given, but unfortunately, such hasn't been done as of now. But what we are seeing also that the wages problem has been something which has been there for the longest time, and this is nothing new, and this is an economic problem, and there's been a historical issue with this as well. And we are just specifically talking about workers from farmland workers, and there's a historical lower wage problem which is basically happening. And a major, reason for the kind of socioeconomic pressure which we're seeing is also because the loss of the work through the Narega of the 100 days work. But unfortunately, the overall situation is that the state government, does not. We are not being very hopeful that the state government will be able to come with any sort of resolution, because right now the state government, cannot provide any assurance, and the workers also do not have any belief system that if they come back, they will be able to find any work over here.
ঠিক আছে, অনেক ধন্যবাদ। Two questions. One is on SIR and xenophobia. If I may respond to this question, SIR is not just about xenophobia. SIR is specifically about manipulating the franchise. The people who are being thrown out of the voter list through SIR, they are, of course, majority of them Adivasis, Dalits, Bengali Muslims, etc. But more than just xenophobia, these are communities which have historically never voted en masse for the Bharatiya Janata Party. That's basically the thing. These are not votes which the BJP hopes to get in enough numbers, and these are votes which in all likelihood can cost the BJP elections. And these are the people who are being thrown out through the SIR. So xenophobia is, of course, part of Hindu nationalist politics, and that, of course, plays itself out in the SIR process or other kinds of targeting of various communities. But the electoral manipulation, the engineering of voters out of the electoral process, I think needs to be seen as a very perverse, method of ending the franchise of people who are not going to vote for you, which strikes at the heart of the idea of the universal adult franchise in the Indian context. Is there a Rohingya refugee community? Are they being deported en masse if they arrive? Any panelist would like to take this question on the Rohingyas? I don't know if Clifton is still here.
Now, I'm here. Actually, I just wanted to make a little more general point in regard to this. What is extremely disconcerting, and is probably, a telltale sign of the kind of disease that's ailing Indian democracy is the manner in which we are referring to human beings from another, let's assume, from another country. Let's assume that there are certain people coming in from other countries, and the only reason why we want to term them as termites, as our Home Minister will do, is because of their Muslim identity. Because the Indian state doesn't have a problem if you're a Hindu coming from the neighboring state, if you're Jain, Parsi, or even a Sikh or a Christian. In fact, the Citizenship Amendment Act offers citizenship belonging to these communities coming from these very same countries. So the problem is not with the Bangladeshi per se. The problem is with the Muslim. So the second thing is the constitution of our country affords rights even to non-citizens. It's not like the constitution of our country says that non-citizens should be treated in this kind of a extremely derogatory, extremely inhuman fashion. If you look at the constitution, Article 14, 20, 21, 22, all of these rights actually accrue not just to citizens but to non-citizens itself. But the manner in which this entire discourse is being created and the manner in which it's being dealt with, it's a kind of a dehumanization of people who may be coming from other countries, if that is true in that sense. I think that's the larger concern I think that people in this country must have about the falling values, about this kind of this is again part of an attack on the constitution, as it were. I just wanted to make that point. I wanted to say this in the beginning itself. Somehow, yeah, thanks, Akash.
Yeah.
Any other question? Just to update you on our work over here. See, there's many times this issue has come up that this order, why is it not being challenged in the court? It was challenged in the Supreme Court, following which the Supreme Court asked various states and union territories to respond to the Supreme Court's notice. Supreme Court asked how this order is being implemented and are rights being violated in the process and so on. This was soon after the Gurugram eviction drive happened, verification drive happened. So at that time, the response was that no further verification drive following Gurgaon, and things calmed down in Gurgaon within a couple of weeks. But following that, we have got reports from various states that this is happening. Now, we are working with Advocate Prashant Bhushan to bring all this to the notice of the Supreme Court again and to raise the matter again in the Supreme Court. However, there's a persistent fear among many senior lawyers that if we push it too hard, there is always a chance that under the given circumstances, the Supreme Court might actually issue an adverse order, which is going to make the lives of our Bengali migrant workers even more difficult. The Supreme Court might actually end up justifying the whole procedure. So that's the reason why many senior advocates have refrained from taking it up and pushing it aggressively. Which is why at the moment, even as Migrant Solidarity Network, our effort has been to try to stand with the workers on the ground, give them legal help as far as possible whenever they are in difficulty. And above all, I think the one thing that has helped, in my opinion, is when we've been able to make the state authorities understand that there are people standing with these migrant workers. They are not alone. So at some level, it comes down to really the basic things that we maintain the strong networks on the ground. We keep track of what's happening. Just yesterday, for instance, we heard that there is a chance that today police may come to Jai Hind colony in Vasant Kunj and ask the residents there for their Aadhaar card. So immediately we alerted some lawyers to be on standby that if something like that happens, we must be there immediately and ask the police why they're doing it. So in Gurgaon also we saw that if citizens are able to be there in person on the ground and they're able to ask the right questions to the police and the authorities, they get very flustered because they know that there is a lot of illegality involved in the whole procedure. So that's something which we've been actively trying to do, be there in person, be there in person on the ground whenever required. And also, there's a need to raise awareness about it. I think today's webinar, one of the reasons for doing it is to actually raise awareness because people don't know. It's just some news that filters out from time to time. Something happened here, something happened there. And unfortunately, we are living in a situation where there's just bad news all around. So at some level, people we didn't feel are responding to this adequately. By people, I mean political parties, civil society, even various unions. And right now, the effort is to make it an issue, not just with regard to what's happening with Bengali Muslim migrant workers, but overall migration as a very crucial aspect of Indian society and politics. And the whole SIR exercise and the verification drive being rooted in the political economy of migration. So the challenge right now is, I think, to make it an issue much more strongly than what it is, which requires a lot of work at the grassroots level. So what we are also trying is to identify areas where Bengali migrant workers have been affected and raise their issues, not just in terms of what the state is doing to them, calling them Bangladeshis or Rohingyas, but bring it to the attention of the state and society and the media that who these people are. They are migrant workers. What kind of conditions are they living in? Are their basic rights as workers being followed? The answer is no. They're living extremely vulnerable lives. They're living without a range of rights which should be available to them. As Clifton said, many of the available rights have now been taken away by the labor codes. So we need to organize here. I think, when we organize, there's a need to recognize the new entanglements of caste, class, gender, religion that's emerging in the course of these exercises and adopt creative ways of organizing on the ground. But as I said, two things that have made whatever difference has been made is on-ground presence and to be able to speak to the officials as and when these things happen, make it clear to the government that we know what's happening and we know it's not constitutional. There's a lot of illegality involved, and put up a resistance then and there. That's really worked. And also efforts to consistently frame this question as part of the political economy of migration and find ways to raise it as an issue in local politics, in state politics, national politics, as and when possible. So that's how it is. That's what we are trying to do. And there are no further questions. We would end the webinar here. And you can be in touch with us and help us in our work. If you want to help us in our work, then please get in touch with us directly. You have many of our contacts, both South Asia Solidarity Group and Migrant Solidarity Network. So that's our effort. And thank you very much for joining the webinar. Especially, I would like to thank all our migrant worker comrades who have joined from different parts of the country. Unfortunately, because of a shortage of time, we were not able to hear all of them. We heard two of our friends. There were others also. But we hope to keep in touch with them and we hope to hear them at some program in the future. Thank you very much on that note.